Why the fuck did Netflix tag the Jeffrey Dahmer documentary LGBTQ? Like, I know it's technically true, but this is not the representation we're looking for.
Alright, you motherfuckers, let's get down to business. We are here, gathered here, tonight or today or whenever the fuck you're watching this, to talk about Jeff. Now, Jeff is. Wait, what the f. Who fuck. That's not. Oh, who. Yo, who fucking made Jeff? This is not the Jeff. Yeah, sorry, my bad. I had to fire whoever the fuck it was that put that guy's picture in. That's not the Jeff we were talking about. This Jeff that we're talking about is completely different from the Jeff that appeared before you. We are sorry for that technical difficulty. The next video I'm probably going to make is on the Good Doctor ABC series, maybe in a week or two when I finish watching. If you want all the Good Doctor Jeff jokes, you could check that video out when it comes out. More specifically, the Jeffrey Dahmer TV show that recently aired on Netflix. Now, this show is quite interesting in that it gives a sort of retelling of the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. Now, we've had many retellings of the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. It was a big thing when it happened. There's been a movie, I think it's called My Friend Dahmer. Lots of media adaptations, as the show coincidentally points out, since it was such a big thing. So clearly this guy has been through the media adaptation gutter. Now, in the ever-changing chasm of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable according to the public image, there are a multitude of character types or personalities that are often quite looked down upon by the general masses, whether it's your con artists or your narcissists, hell, even your occasional gangbanger. And then there's Jeff, a monster who mercilessly killed over a dozen young men, pretty much the epitome of evil. And very few arguments have been made to the contrary. Now, I am not here to discuss or try and do a deep psychoanalysis of Jeffrey Dahmer or what could have prompted the guy to commit such atrocious and heinous acts, because that alone is a video in and of itself, and I have neither the time nor the expertise as a psychoanalyst to try and pick apart everything that would come with having to make that sort of video. So that's not what I'm doing. What I'm interested in is a particular headline delivered by the Hollywood Reporter. Now, as you can see, the headline reads, Netflix removes LGBTQ tag from Dahmer's series after viewers protest. Now, viewers can be interchanged with woke activists. It's just a plain and simple fact, because as you read this article, as we continue to read this article, it'll become evident as to who exactly is being triggered by Netflix and the LGBTQ tag being under the Dahmer series. Now, we start by looking at the subtitle, which reads, a number of subscribers called out the streamer for using the label on the True Crime Limited series. Well, okay. Netflix has taken an LGBTQ tag off of its true crime series Dahmer, Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, after an outcry from viewers. Side note, Dahmer, Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story. It's kind of an odd title. I think you could have just titled it Dahmer or just Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, but Dahmer, Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story is it's a bit weird. Anyway, the tag was one of several categories initially used to categorize the limited series about the serial killer from Ryan Murphy and Ian Brennan, along with labels like dark, horror, and vintage crime. Viewers noticed and raised objections online. Anyone else think it's pretty gross of Netflix to list Dahmer under LGBTQ, especially when the true crime tag would have worked? Read one representative tweet. Yeah, and we. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I, I'm taking a screenshot right now. You'll probably see it on your screen in a few moments, or it's already on it. Now, a well-viewed TikTok video expressed a similar sentiment, noting that the show is not the representation we're looking for. Netflix subsequently removed the category tag. Now, that is the video which appeared in the intro.
Why the fuck did Netflix tag the Jeffrey Dahmer documentary LGBTQ? Like, I know it's technically true, but this is not the representation we're looking for.
Now, we're going to read the rest of the article, and I'll give you my thoughts on it afterwards. Uh, the Hollywood Reporter has asked Netflix for comment. Dahmer was gay, as were a number of his victims, but Netflix typically uses the LGBTQ tag for titles that reflect more rounded experiences in the LGBTQ community, among them Uncoupled, Sex Education, and Heartstopper. As of Wednesday afternoon, Monster was listed under Crime, Ominous, Psychological, and Horror. The series has also been criticized by a survivor of one of the victims. In an essay for Insider, Rita Isabel, the sister of Errol Lindsay, whom Dahmer murdered in 1991, wrote that it bothered me to see her victim impact statement from the killer's 1992 trial dramatized on the show. I could even understand it if they gave some of the money to the victims' children. The victims have children and grandchildren, Isabel wrote. If the show benefited them in some way, it wouldn't feel so harsh and careless. It's sad that they're just making money off of this tragedy. That's just greed. Dahmer Monster was Netflix's most popular series for the week of September 19th through 25th. The streamer said its subscribers worldwide spent more than 196 million hours watching the show during its premiere week. Now, that's the end of the article. Now, there's many things to break apart in this article, but there are certain parts of this which I actually agree with. Now, this is interesting because the article itself doesn't even have one main focus. It's divided, I think, into two parts. One is the TikToker complaining that it's being tagged under LGBTQ stories, and then the other one is talking about how a survivor is calling out the show, stating that it's not benefiting the families or the victims, children of the victims, things of that nature. And those are two completely, I mean, I guess it's under the general umbrella of criticizing the show, but to me, they feel really different. And I kind of have to agree with the latter statement, the later statements made by the sister of Errol Lindsay, who says Dahmer murdered in 1991 and wrote that it bothered me to see her victim impact statement from the killer's 1992 trial dramatized in the show. And that's completely understandable. I mean, obviously, someone who went through that sort of trauma and that sort of devastating experience would hate to. I would honestly hate to see it be replayed for the amusement of others, which is totally understandable. Now, this is a completely valid point. I could even understand it if they gave some of the money to the victims' children. The victims have children, yeah, it's all this is all valid. I find it a little bit odd that an adaptation of Jeffrey Dahmer wouldn't be made without the initial purpose of trying to aid the victims or the family of the victims who are greatly affected by this, because especially on the subject matter, right? It's not like you're, I don't know, making a biopic about someone. The subject matter, killings, lives being taken away without regard for anyone else. I mean, it's the type of subject matter that warrants this type of outcry. This part of the article I can totally sympathize with. Now, the one I cannot sympathize with is the TikToker, the TikToker, and the one lone Twitter Mrs. What's her name again? Frances Deadly Silver Auntie Danger. Frances Danger. Now, before I say anything at all, I personally just want to reread this person's tweet and then scroll through some of the replies just to get a general sense of what the response is. Now, if I need to stay in my lane, absolutely tell me, but anyone else think it's pretty gross of Netflix to list Dahmer under the LGBTQ branch, especially when the true crime tag would have worked? I'll give you that. True crime would have worked. Now, look at this. You totally need to stay in your lane. As a gay man, I am fed up of seeing others like you try and speak for us. Dahmer, Dennis Nilsen, John Wayne Gacy, etc. are a part of gay history, and gays need to educate ourselves on dangers we could face. Stick to policing your own social group. Way to stick into the Matt D. Uh, but yeah, I couldn't agree more. Jeffrey Dahmer was an unfortunate part of gay history, just like Hitler was an unfortunate part of German history. It all depends on how you teach it. Germany, if I assume correctly, they teach that era as a shameful period in their history. It's something to be ashamed of and something which should never be repeated ever again. And the same logic applies to Dahmer. Now, yes, I get it. You don't want that type of representation because, oh, I'm so high and mighty that I can't be portrayed in a negative way just because I identify as a letter or uh, some sort of sexuality. That's not how it works. Jeffrey Dahmer is just as much a part of gay history as was the first law that managed to legalize gay marriage. It's like a package deal. You get the good and the bad. It more goes to show the arrogance of certain people thinking that they can omit certain aspects of general history. That's like trying to get rid of the fact that Russia was once a communist country. That's like trying to omit the fact that the United States bombed the fuck out of Japan. It's like you can't pick and choose what parts of history you want to keep within your records to make yourself look good. That applies to anyone. You have to take everything, the good and the bad, as a package deal. There's no omitting things. Now, the 1990s and the early 1980s, back around that time, it was a different time. I could totally buy an officer returning a young boy to someone like Jeffrey Dahmer simply because, he looked like a well-kept mannered dude, and I could totally see them writing off the accounts of a African American person because that's the time that they were living in. The 1990s was a different time. Yeah, obviously it was way after segregation was abolished, but still there was still a sort of racial tension there, especially considering when it was eventually discovered that the victim pool of Jeffrey Dahmer was primarily African American young men. There's even a line in the show, I think it was in episode 5 or 6, was a flash forward to when Jeffrey was caught. It was like a reverend, right? And he was going up to, like, I think like it was like a mayor or something, and then I think the mayor specifically says we need to try and put a lid on this before it becomes something bigger than just a serial killer just killing people, just trying to keep racial tensions down before it becomes a whole thing about, oh, this guy's a racist. Now, there could be much criticism about how much exactly Jeffrey Dahmer was enabled by still pretty flawed legal system. But again, that is another video. I'm not here to talk about the legal system. It's just about going back to an earlier sentiment, warnings. Like Germany doesn't teach Mr. Hitler uh, in a way that's prideful. In the same way that the Jeffrey Dahmer story can be used as a cautionary tale, a tale of what happens when we don't keep our justice system in check, when witness statements and following up isn't practiced. A tale of what could happen if we just turn a blind eye to facts that are just staring us in the face. A cautionary tale that basically says just take a second look, look again, look deeper. You may be able to find something that wasn't there before. A tale that says you might just save a life if you spend 5 more minutes looking at something. Now, I personally started watching this show at around, I want to say 10, maybe, no, I want to say like 7 or 8 o'clock at night one night. and I stayed up until 5 o'clock a.m. just to see the entire thing through. That's how much it was captivating, and that's pretty much what inspired me to make this video. And seeing the backlash that came from the show by people who would omit things from histories, it's like it gives me like mega Planet of the Apes vibes, with freaking Dr. Zaius trying to, obscure human history. I personally just felt that it's just completely disingenuous to try and omit things, and in order to completely give an accurate representation of any given thing, you have to encompass both good and bad things. There is no picking and choosing here. And in the same sort of sentiment, all one has to do is look at tweets like this. There's people in the LGBTQ community who are just tired of being spoken for. They're tired of having their feelings misconstrued and misrepresented. They're tired of being pandered to rather than have an ample, rich, quite disturbing story about a gay man who went on a killing spree to serve as a source of education, as a cautionary tale, rather than become an excuse for a tag to be removed. Unfortunately for these politically driven nut jobs that exist on the internet, the fact remains that that's not how Jeffrey Dahmer is remembered. Jeffrey Dahmer, more than anything, is remembered as a serial killer. Gay or not remains secondary. The first thing, I'm not saying secondary as oh it doesn't matter. It matters, but the first thing, first and foremost, what he is remembered as is a serial killer. And, this is me assuming that these psychopaths on the internet consider serial killers to be bad people, rather than omitting things, rather than keeping things hidden, rather than, not being wanted to be represented by that. Use this series as a way to educate people. Use this series as a way to educate that community that you're a part of. People can be educated by this in more ways than one, honestly. The dangers of going out by yourself at any given time. The dangers of, hooking up with random strangers that you don't know or haven't vetted previously. The lessons that can be learned from this, looking twice, paying close attention, always keeping one eye open, even if your other eye is closed, always looking behind your back, always making sure you haven't missed anything, always making sure to list every mental detail of a stranger, always making sure to keep that alarm in your head working, rather than shunning it and trying to disassociate it from your tag. Use it as a means of education, because you never know. It could just wind up saving a life.